Okay, imagine this scenario. You're a private pilot, you love flying VFR, visual flight rules, sky's clear, great views, but then maybe a patch of unexpected weather moves in, and suddenly those clouds, they look pretty impassable. You find yourself wishing you had more options, right?
Right.
More confidence, maybe. But that full instrument rating, the IR, it just seems huge, like trying to drink from a fire hose. So the
Mhm.
question is there a practical middle ground for pilots like us?
Well, that is exactly the spot the EASA Basic Instrument Rating, the BIR, is designed to fill. It's meant to be precisely that solution. And today, in this deep dive, we're really going to unpack what the BIR is truly about. We're using a source that talks specifically about how it bridges that gap you mentioned. And crucially, this isn't just about passing an exam, it's really fundamentally about getting you ready for the cockpit, building real skill for real weather.
Okay, let's get into that. Our source mentions this wide gap between PPL theory, which is too basic, and full IR theory, which is too much for most of us.
Mm-hmm.
What does that gap actually mean for, a keen GA pilot flying their own plane? Why has it been such a problem for so long?
Yeah, it's been a real issue. Historically, if you wanted any instrument capability beyond basic VFR, you were kind of forced to, well, cobble together bits and pieces. You'd be grabbing stuff from PPL materials, which don't go deep enough, and then trying to understand complex procedures from the full IR syllabus. Things like, I don't know, long-range oceanic stuff or multi-crew
Things
concepts.
that just don't apply if you're flying a typical four-seater.
Exactly. It was inefficient, didn't really fit the reality of flying, say, a Cessna or a Piper in typical European weather. It left a lot of pilots feeling, frankly, underprepared for actual IFR. The BIR is specifically designed to fill that void for GA pilots, bridging that gap with something targeted and practical.
Right. So if the old way was this kind of patchwork approach, what's the core philosophy of the BIR itself? How is it really different from the traditional full instrument rating?
At its heart, the BIR is, as the source says, practical, modular, and made for private pilots who fly for passion and utility, not for profession. That's the key difference. This isn't about memorizing things for a potential airline job down the line.
Okay.
It's described as a modern, competency-based alternative, and importantly, it's designed for real pilots flying real airplanes in real weather.
Hmm.
What that means is the whole thing is structured around what you actually need to know and do to be safe and proficient flying IFR in general aviation. It actively cuts away the stuff that's overly academic or only relevant for, jets or complex commercial ops. You don't get bogged down.
That really does sound much more tailored. But you could argue, doesn't the full IR give you a brighter foundation, maybe more versatile for the future? Especially thinking about that line from our source. The BIR does not simply prepare you for the exam, it prepares you for the cockpit.
Mm.
What does that really mean when you're actually up there?
Yeah, that's a critical point. What this means in the cockpit is a fundamental shift in focus. It's less about just ticking boxes for an examiner.
Passing the test.
Right. And more about building genuine, usable skills for real-world IFR flying. So imagine you're in your Cessna and the weather changes, maybe faster than forecast. You encounter IMC. The BIR training is focused on that kind of scenario, managing workload during an approach, maybe in turbulence, really understanding your instruments under pressure.
Not just reciting definitions of airspace classes.
Exactly. It's about handling the unexpected, navigating effectively, and simply flying the aircraft accurately by instruments when you need to. And thinking about how to remember this for the test in the skies. When you grasp the purpose behind the theory, like why this entry procedure exists or why we use these specific airspeeds, that knowledge actually sticks.
Makes sense. It's not just rote learning then.
No, it fosters real competence. Understanding leads to retention, both for the exam and, more importantly, for when you're actually flying. This focus on proficiency cuts out the noise. You learn what genuinely matters for your kind of flying.
Okay, so it really feels like the EASA BIR is that tailored, practical instrument rating that many private pilots have been looking for, something that addresses our specific needs. This deep dive really clarifies its purpose.
Absolutely. And maybe this raises an important question for you listening right now. How does knowing the BIR is truly designed to prepare you for the cockpit, for real proficiency in actual weather? How does that fundamentally change your approach to instrument training and perhaps your whole vision for flying in the clouds?